Okay, well, let's see. Why don't you look in your Bibles this morning in Colossians chapter 1, beginning with verse 12. And before I start reading, I want to tell you something. This is just a little example to set the framework for what got me thinking this way. One vehicle that I drive, I open the door on the passenger side. I usually don't get in that door. And there underneath one of the seats was an umbrella. And I didn't even realize it was there. And I didn't, because I didn't know it was there here a few weeks ago, last time it rained. Of course, when I talk about when it rained, I think, when did it ever rain? Well, it did rain here a while back. And I remember being in that exact same vehicle, and I was out somewhere when the rain started, and I remember getting all wet, and everything I had, at the store or whatever, I got all wet. And in that very vehicle was an umbrella. But because I didn't know about it, because I wasn't aware of it, I missed the benefit of it. And it was there the whole time. And it was there for me to use. I don't even know who put it there. Must have been April. I don't know. Somebody put it under the seat. But listen, because I didn't know about it, I went without. And I missed the benefit of it. And I got wet. And I got rained on. And I had an unpleasant experience. See, this had a real impact on my experience in life. And it didn't need to if I would have only known what I had. You see the point I'm making by that. And so I think it's good, spiritually speaking, to be aware of what we have. And I started looking at some passages of Scripture that talk about, that use that exact language. What we have things. Paul tells us that in his epistles. And here's one where he says that. It's so nice to have the Bible on the computer, because you can just type in the little search box any phrase or any word, and it'll find where those words appear. And so I just typed in, "we have," and look to see what we have. And I think it's good to know what we have. And there's a lot, and even if it doesn't use those exact words. So I just found a few that I'd like to read to you this morning, just to remind us of what we have, so you don't do like I did with the umbrella under the seat and go through life with a bad experience. It's almost as though sometimes, we might be tempted to say, an unpleasant experience in life. So, well, God, why didn't you do something about that? And He might, honestly answer, I've already done something about it. You just didn't know about it, So there's lots of things, and there's lots of ways we could go with this, and lots of things we could talk about. But I'm just going to stay with some basic ones, and before it actually says what we have. Anyway, Colossians chapter 1, verse 12. I'm just going to jump in here. Paul writes in these very long sentences, so I'm kind of jumping in the middle of a thought. Anyway, he says this, giving thanks unto the Father, which hath made us meet. Now, that word meet there, that's a strange kind of a usage of that word. We don't use that word in that way now. What it really means, if you look it up, the word meet, as it's used there, it means qualified. It means equipped or qualified. Qualified is probably the best word. Giving thanks unto the Father, which has, we could say, qualified us to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in light. And that's a good thought right there, by the way, just to stick with that for a second. It's He who qualified us. Now, if it was up to us to qualify ourselves, I think a lot of Christians labor under that idea that we have to qualify ourselves. And that's a pretty daunting task. And how do you ever know if you have? That's the thing. It creates a lot of fear and uncertainty. And having talked to a lot of Christians over the years, I think a lot of Christians do have a lot of fear and uncertainty because they're either they think it themselves or are led to believe that they themselves have to qualify. I just hope I'm good enough. I just hope I've done enough good things and avoided enough bad things. I just hope I'm good enough that God will accept me. Listen, if it were that way, if it were up to that, there's no Jesus in that equation. It's Jesus who's good enough. And our being qualified is all, notice what it said? Thanks to the Father, which made us qualified. Meet means qualified, appropriate, compatible. He qualified us. And it says to be partakers. He made us worthy to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in light. Okay, verse 13. Who, meaning God the Father, hath delivered us from the power of darkness Again, this is telling us something that He's already done for us. He has delivered us from the power of darkness and has translated us into the kingdom of His dear Son. That's a good thought. We're already there. According to this, it says He has translated us into the kingdom of His dear Son. It's not a matter of trying to get in, we're already in. I like the fact that He says He's delivered us from the power of darkness. I know sometimes people get worried about the devil or bad people, and people's, somebody said something bad about me or spoke something bad over me. Listen, He's delivered us from the power of darkness. The power of darkness has no power over you. There isn't any devil anywhere that can do anything to you that you won't let him. And people who pronounce curses and say bad things, it has, in the Old Testament there's a story about this prophet of God, and the children of Israel were crossing the land, and this king brought him up on this mountain. He said, "Look, I want you to curse them." And he says, "I can't curse whom God has blessed." See, that's the thought. Doesn't matter what anybody says. I've heard a story. I don't know if you know who Andrew Womack is. He's on television in the morning sometimes, and we get tapes from him and partners with his ministry. But I heard him tell this story one time. He was flying on a plane, and when you get on a plane, you buy your ticket, you sit down, and somebody else might be sitting next to you. You don't have any control over who's sitting next to you. And he sat down on the plane, and this man sitting next to him, I'm trying to think of a polite way to say this. He just looked like something was wrong. Just not the ordinary, person, He had kind of scraggly, longish hair and long fingernails, and just looked kind of mean, a little bit scary. And so Andrew thought, well, whatever, I'm not going to. So the flight started, and they were up and going along, and so he put the little tray down, got his Bible out, and started to read his Bible. And this man next to him just got upset and got agitated and says, "What do you think you're doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to read my Bible." He says, "You can't read that Bible in my presence. Don't you know who I am?" He said, "No, I don't know who you are." He said, "Well, I am the high priest of the something or other Church of Satan." He says, "I don't care. I'm still going to read my Bible." And this guy just flew into a rage and just began cursing and saying bad words. And he said, "You put that away or I'll place a curse on you." And he said, "You go ahead and try it. You just try it. Go ahead. I double dog dare you. Give me your best one. Shoot your best shot, because my God's bigger than your God." That's what he said. Well, see, that's the thought that's here. Who hath delivered us from the power of darkness? Satan's got nothing that can compete with God. And He's already delivered us from the power of darkness. That's a good thought to know, isn't it? Yeah, I think that's good. Anyway, that was a funny story. Luckily, I've never had that experience. So I'll tell you about his. Okay, now, here's where it comes to what we have. Those are all things we have, too. Has delivered us into the kingdom of His dear Son. Verse 14, it says, "In whom," now when he says "in whom," it means the Son, means Jesus. It said, "into the kingdom of His dear Son, in whom," meaning Jesus, "in whom we have redemption, through His blood, even the forgiveness of sins." Now the first thing he points out here that says we have is redemption. Now that's a kind of it's a religious sounding word that we read, and we sang about it this morning, "Let the redeemed of the Lord say so." And we say it and we read it, and it's one of those words that just sounds religious, but I don't think we often just stop and consider it. If I were to ask you, what does redemption really mean? Well, I was pondering that last night. I looked it up in the dictionary and looked it up in Strong's Concordance. In Strong's Concordance, the Greek word is apolutrosis, and for redemption. It means literally a release by paying a ransom. Released by paying a ransom. And I thought that was interesting. Released, or freedom in other words. Released by paying a ransom. Well, now, that's an interesting thought to me. Released by paying a ransom. So it says, "In whom," that is to say Christ, "we have redemption." We have been released by paying a ransom. It says, "through His blood." So evidently His blood was the price that paid the ransom. Even the forgiveness of sins. He adds that to help amplify or explain what he's saying. And the thought that crossed my mind is, well, if this is something that we have a release through paying a ransom, well, who did He pay the ransom to? And that's a question that comes to my mind. Why was it necessary to pay a ransom? And as I began looking at that, it's not a who, but a what. And here it is, he tells us specifically here in Galatians chapter 3. Phil, if you could give me that. Galatians chapter 3.